Well, hello viewers. Today something else. Instead of just my playthrough video, I decided to make a bit of an instructional video or a guide, if you will, for new players and possibly existing players of Fallout 4. Now, as I've been playing through SimSettlements 2 mod for the first time without too many hints or clues, I discovered quite a few new things about Fallout 4 that I wanted to share with you. And one of them, as the video title suggests, is of course the linking system for settlements or settlements in general. How they work, the drawbacks, the prices, the costs, the benefits, and so on and so forth. But in order to fully understand the linking system and the differences and the possibilities, one needs to understand the container system, and that's what I'm going to talk about first in Fallout 4. Now, there are 4 classes of containers, and they all come with their drawbacks and benefits. And the first one I want to talk to you about is isolated containers. First type, isolated containers, works on the principle of what you put in is what you take out, meaning that there's no further interaction with the containers. They come in all shapes and sizes. As you probably know, you can build them in your settlements, but you can encounter hundreds, probably thousands of them in the Commonwealth with loot. As far as I know, there is no interaction with the container between it and any other NPC, meaning that what you put in is literally what you take out. Nothing disappears and nothing goes in there. There might be some exceptions that certain NPCs are scripted to do during a quest. They may move an item here and there, but otherwise, everything you put in an isolated container is perfectly safe and will never disappear. They have unlimited capacity, so you can put in as much as you like, literally millions of items, unlimited weight, no restrictions whatsoever. As I mentioned, they are safe from thieves and settlers alike, so friends and foes will not touch isolated containers, making them perfectly safe to store your valuables. The downside of these containers is that they have no additional features. They are very vanilla, plain and simple. As I said, what you put in is what you take out, and there might be a reset on them in certain instances where enemies can spawn after a long time. For example, the Corvega plant, the insides of the Corvega plant might reset together with the raider spawns, and anything in a container in that instance may actually disappear, but I cannot confirm that at this time. So that's for Class 1, isolated containers. Class 2 is inventory, or personal inventory and NPC inventory. These are slightly different, but pretty much work on the same principle. Pretty much as the isolated container, what you put in is what you take out. However, they are restricted. They have a weight limit. NPCs will only carry so much as they can carry concerning their weight restriction. This can be expanded upon, depending on what kind of armor they wear, if it's your companion, or NPCs for that matter. Any NPC carrying deep-pocketed armor, for instance, can carry a lot more. The backpack can expand it, but they will not go beyond their rather limited weight restriction. In case of the character's inventory, however, you probably know you can go way beyond. You have an unlimited amount of stuff you can carry, but the more you go beyond your weight restriction, the slower you move, and eventually you'll break your legs, so you might want to rethink that. Another thing different from the isolated container is that the personal inventory is reduced, effectively, by the armor and clothing you wear. Armor and clothing and weapons and all that sort have a weight class of their own, and that is contributed to your inventory space, so bear that in mind. How does it work? Pretty much as the insulated container, what you put in is what you take out, but there are some exceptions. For one thing, you have to understand the difference between your NPC inventory, your companion inventory, and your personal inventory. NPCs do not consume ammo. So if you put ammo in their inventory with a weapon, the ammo is not consumed. However, your companions do consume ammo, so ammo disappears out of this inventory unless they're using their default weapon. Their default weapon does not consume ammo. Default weapons for companions, examples are the 10mm for Piper and the laser musket for Garvey. They will always have ammo for that, and that weapon actually doesn't physically exist within their inventory. That is an exception. So that weapon can never be removed off this character, but it can be overwritten by giving them a different weapon and forcing them to use it, but they will consume ammo on that. And your personal inventory, of course, you will also consume ammo out of when you fire. Furthermore, that's for things disappearing. What about things appearing in NPC and companion inventories? That also occurs. Unlike insulated containers, NPCs, inhabitants, friendly NPCs within your settlement, and this can be either a settler, a specific named settler, or a companion that is currently not with you at the time they become an inhabitant of the settlement, they will reach in to a certain container, which I'll talk about in a moment, and they will take weapons and ammo, and I believe certain other things, out of that container. So NPCs and inhabitants in general of your settlements can end up with a whole bunch of different weapons and ammunition accordingly. So that can change as well. Alright, where do they take this ammo and weapons out of? Well, that is class number 3 of the storage container, and that is the workbench. And a workbench container works quite differently from the other two that we've previously discussed. So what is a workbench container? Well, a workbench container, unlike insulated containers, you cannot build them, for one thing. They exist, one in every settlement, and for those who've played the game before, I'm pretty sure you know what they are. Those are the very workbenches that you interact with at every settlement. So you can't build them, you can't destroy them, not unless you have a specific mod for that, you can't move them. But they do come with some benefits and some disbenefits. The first problem is they do not work on the concept of what you put in is what you take out. It's a free-for-all concept. As I discussed before, the NPCs or inhabitants of your settlements, be it an NPC or a defunct companion, they will occasionally reach into your workbench and take weapons and ammo, and I believe sometimes even armor. I'm not 100% sure. One of the biggest problems with that is that they can reach in and actually take a fusion core. They will take this fusion core and put it into a power armor in the settlement, which means your NPCs will start walking around with your power armor if you're not careful where you put your fusion cores. So always be very, very wary of what you put in a workbench, because settlers or inhabitants of your settlements can take stuff out of it. That is the first thing that can happen. The second thing is upkeep cost. With the introduction of Sim Settlements 1 and 2, there is a linkage between Sim Settlement 1 or Sim Settlements General in plots with the workbench. Now, Sim Settlements 1 and 2 differ a little there. Sim Settlement 1 worked exclusively with your workbench content, which means everything paid came out of your workbench and everything produced by Sim Settlement 1 plots goes into your workbench. However, Sim Settlements 2 is a little different, and I'll talk to you about that with the fourth container type in just a moment. But do know that the workbench, as well as the personal inventory of the character, can be accessed by Sim Settlements 2 plots if your settings are configured in such a manner. So things can, again, disappear out of your workbench. For upkeep costs, for instance, that will be mostly junk, but it can also be food and purified water. This is consumed by your settlers if they don't have access to enough of these items in the fourth container type. But What are the benefits of workbenches? Well, for one thing, all your crafting benches within a settlement will have access to this workbench, meaning that if you create mods, the materials required for those mods will be taken out of your workbench. If the workbench does not have those items, it will be taken out of your personal inventory, and if your personal inventory doesn't have the required ingredients, then you cannot make it. And this is not just for mods, this is also true for cooking. So if you're at a cooking station and you want to cook some meat, you extract the meat from either your personal inventory or the workbench. So you don't need to actually physically take it out of the workbench, move it over to the crafting bench and craft it. That is all automated. Very handy. The same thing happens is when you're going to build mode. You probably know this already, but just for those who don't, when you're in build mode and you're building something, you need raw materials. These raw materials are created from scrapping junk. This all happens automatically, and that junk is scrapped within your workbench. If your workbench does not contain the sufficient amount of scrap or raw materials, it comes out of your personal inventory again, and you can build whatever item it is you're trying to build. If you can't build it, if it's grayed out, it means that those items are in either your personal inventory or in the workbench. What else? Right, another disbenefit of the workbench is, though even it is unlimited in capacity, the more stuff you put in, the wealthier a settlement becomes. Yes, it is a hidden script under the hood, but the more stuff a settlement has in its workbench, mind you, not an isolated container. Isolated container content does not contribute to this fact. The richer a settlement becomes. And why does that matter? Why is wealth of a settlement important? Well, the wealthier it becomes, the more likely it is to become a target of attack of random attacks like raiders, the Jolly Green Man, what are they called, super muties, and the robot fanatics. Well, pretty much anybody can attack a settlement, and it becomes more frequent and more likely to happen the more stuff you have in a workbench, because the settlement is considered wealthier. What is another benefit, though, is that workbenches can be linked to each other. This is the first part in the linkage system that I'm going to talk about later, but do know that these workbenches can be linked, and that is very important. Alright, that's it for workbenches. On to the fourth type of container. Alright, so what is the fourth container type? Well, as I mentioned, SimSettlement 1 had all its plots linked to the workbench content, and that led to a bit of an economic lopsided problem. As Kinggath in many of his videos mentioned, when you play SimSettlement 1 and you plot down a couple of plots, you will be overrun by certain resources. And to prevent this breakage of player economy, Kinggath introduced the, let's say, SimSettlement economy, which we refer to as the virtual storage. This was designed to separate SimSettlement economy from the player-based economy, making the game not too easy early game. But there is still an interaction between the virtual storage and your workbench and your player economy, and understanding what works and what does not work, where it is linked and where it is not linked, is vital to understanding the SimSettlement economy. So what is a virtual storage? Well, just like the workbench storage, there is one per settlement. Just like the workbench storage, it can be linked among the settlements. But unlike the workbench storage, what you put in is not what you take out. In other words, you cannot take out anything out of the virtual storage. Anything that goes in there stays in there, and the only way that items are removed from the virtual storage is through SimSettlement 2 Economy, referring to plots that either require upgrade cost, construction cost, or upkeep cost that is paid through this storage. However, just like the workbench, when you're crafting something, items are taken out of the workbench, but if the workbench doesn't have those items, you take them out of your personal inventory. And this extra step into storage facilities works the same way. If the virtual storage does not have the items required to pay upkeep, upgrade, or construction costs, those items are taken out of your workbench. So be very careful because your workbench can be drained that way. If the workbench does not have those items, they will be taken out of your personal inventory again. So these steps go down and down and down. However, you can switch off this option in the Sim Settlement menu, preventing plots from paying their upkeep costs, for instance, out of either your workbench or your personal inventory. Personally, I have my personal inventory locked off. Sim Settlement plots does not have access to my personal inventory, but it does have access to my workbench. But early game, that can be very problematic, because if your virtual storage does not contain enough resources to pay the upkeep, your workbench gets drained, and all of a sudden all your steel, concrete, and copper is gone in an instant. So be very careful when you have this option on, and it is on by default. So I suggest turning it off and instead having your plots run dry and not pay their upkeep costs, because that's better than losing all your inventory in your workbench and all of a sudden noticing that you're out of stuff and you need to go scavenge for a couple of hours. Very annoying indeed. So best to just limit it to the virtual storage. You can, however, even when you have your workbench and your personal inventory locked off from upkeep costs, you can still add items into this virtual storage. But those items, as I said, cannot be removed by yourself, only by Sim Settlement plots. So how do you add items into the virtual storage? You can do that with your manager's desk. There is a safe on top of your manager desk or underneath it, depending which visual desk you have, and you can add items in there. You can either do it per item, or you can simply tell it to take all the stuff out of your workbench and it'll go into your virtual storage, and that's it. So, size of virtual storage. Now, virtual storage is, unlike the workbench, not unlimited. There is a limited size to it. There is a restriction. However, you can expand it quite easily. Every industrial plot you build will add size to this virtual storage. However, sometimes you don't want to build industrial plots anymore. You can still keep expanding its storage capacity simply by building virtual storage units. And those units you can find under the Sim Settlement 2 tab of the workbench. So you build them like any other storage unit, but they're under the Sim Settlement tab. Pretty easy. And you can expand pretty much indefinitely on that. Those storage units are not accessible, just like the virtual storage. They just expand the virtual storage capacity. A couple of important things about this virtual storage is what goes in it and what does not. Let me tell you about that. Right, so as I just mentioned, the Sim Settlement 2 plots, they interact with both the virtual storage and your workbench. So the question is, how do they interact with one or the other? And for that, you need to look at the plot type itself. Let's start with the first one, the simple one, the residential plots. Now, the residential plots, they have an upkeep cost and they produce taxes. The upkeep cost is, as I mentioned before, taken out of your virtual storage. If your virtual storage doesn't have it, it comes out of your workbench, and otherwise your inventory, your personal inventory. That's for the upkeep cost. They produce taxes, 6 caps, I believe, per person, per bed that is occupied. Those 6 coins go into your virtual storage. So what is the tax system then in the Sim Settlement 2 option? It took me a while to figure that out, but the Sim Settlement 2 tax option does not determine those 6 caps. Those 6 caps are standard. They cannot be changed. Those 6 caps will always go into virtual storage. But the tax rate that you set in Sim Settlements 2 options is the percentage of those 6 caps that goes into your workbench on top of that. So in other words, if you put it to, let's say 50%, if your tax rate is 50%, then the occupant of a bed will pay 6 caps into your virtual storage and 3 caps into your workbench. And the caps in your workbench you can access, so it does make you richer. And the same is true for commercial plots. Commercial plots essentially work the same way as residential plots. They have an upkeep cost, which is paid by your virtual storage, otherwise your workbench if there isn't enough, and then your personal storage again. And the money they generate goes into your virtual storage, which is inaccessible. But the percentage of tax rate of SimSettlements 2 goes into your workbench. So again, if you have a commercial plot producing 40 coins and you have a tax rate of 50%, you actually produce 60 coins, 40 of which will go into your virtual storage and 20 will go into your workbench, which you can pick up every so often. So that's it for commercial plots and residential plots. Entertainment plots and municipal plots essentially work the same way. Recreational plots produce recreational value, so happiness, or they train people, which doesn't go anywhere, it just happens, and their upkeep cost comes out of the virtual storage. Municipal plots produce services, power, and water, which goes into your settlement, and their upkeep cost is paid out of the virtual storage. So those are pretty straightforward. But then comes, and the same is true for martial plots, of course. They produce protection, and their upkeep cost comes out of the virtual storage, just like all the other plots. But industry and agriculture work a little different, particularly industry. Industry, you have essentially two classes of plots. The first one being a scavenger plot. Scavenger plots works the same as the vanilla scavenger station that you can build when the game was released. What does that do? The scavenger plot scavenge for junk, but also miscellaneous items at times, and those items of a scavenger plot again goes into your workbench. The upkeep cost is paid the same way as all the other plots, so I don't need to explain that. So scavenger plots go into your workbench. However, there are 4 other types of industrial plots, being, let me see, I think biological, rare items, mechanical items, and one other, I forgot what they are. Construction items, that's it. The first unlock is construction items, and you can build, for instance, a construction forge. Now, this particular industrial plot does not put anything into your workbench. This actually produces a lot more items, but they all go into your virtual storage, and they're all of one specific component type. In order to understand that, you need to go into your settings menu, because SimSettlement 2 Economy comes in 3 flavors. You can put all the stuff that your industrial plot produces into one class. That is the most basic one. You can put it into 4 types of groups, or you can use the 31 component system, which can be tricky because sometimes you run out of certain components and it's very hard to get them, so you need to personally donate them into the virtual storage. I personally use the 4 class system because they correspond with the 4 classes of specialized industrial plots that I mentioned before. Construction type, biological type, mechanical type, and rare types. Now these do unlock over time, so it can take a while for you to get those classes initially, but they do unlock over time. So those 4 classes, again, they put all their output into the virtual storage, while scavenger plots, they produce far less and they produce total random stuff, but that goes into your workbench storage. So once you have enough scavenger plots, you could open up your workbench for upkeep cost payments into SimSettlements 2 plots, but at the beginning I would actually shut this avenue off and not allow SimSettlement plot to access your workbench. As I mentioned before, it would drain your resources rather fast, but if you have enough scavenger plots up and running, that should no longer be an issue. Now, agricultural plots. Agricultural plots have their upkeep as well. They're paid the same way as all the other plots, but what about their production? Now, as of today, with SimSettlements 105 and Workbench Framework 208, there seems to be a bug that Kinggath is aware of, that agricultural plots do not work entirely as intended. Their production should have been twofold, from what I understand. One, they produce food, and this food just goes into your settlement storage. In other words, you produce the food and the food is consumed, and any excess food should actually show up in your workbench, but it doesn't at the moment, or at least not at the right ratio. So, for example, I'm producing 20 food for 10 settlers. That means I produce twice as much food as I have settlers. Then there a certain amount of that food should end up as usable ingredients in your workbench, but that is currently either not happening or not happening sufficiently, meaning that you need to produce 4, 5, or even 6 times more food than you have settlers in order for that to occur. However, this is considered a workshop framework issue, apparently, and it is on the to-do list for the Sim Settlements team. So agricultural plots do access the sort of virtual storage where they produce food for settlers and should in the future produce certain amount of ingredients that show up in your workbench. So you can see that some plots do work with the workbench and some plots do not. And this is extremely important to know when you're building certain plots and what your goal is to build those plots. What is your achievement? What are you trying to achieve? This may change in the future. If I missed anything, please put that in the comments below, but I believe I've covered the difference now very clearly between virtual and workbench storage. Keep that in mind when you're building up your settlements, and you may have to, as I said, very good advice, twiddle with the settings of Sim Settlements 2 at the beginning versus when your settlement is fully growing and you have an abundance of resources flowing. Alright. Now that we have the 4 storage classes identified, what are the benefits and how do they interact with the Sim Settlement plot system? And again, if you have any questions about that, please do place them in the comments below, because if these questions arise a lot, other people might learn from them, and if they occur a lot, I will put them in the description. A quick frequently asked question topic right there. But now that we know these systems, the storage system, we can start talking about how to link our settlements. And at the time of this video, I'm aware of essentially 3 types or 3 ways of linking your settlements. The first one is the vanilla system, which I refer to as the provisioner system. So what is the provisioner system? The provisioner system does have some benefits over the others. First of all, how does it work? Well, for a provisioner system to work, you need, of course, 2 settlements to link, and you need 1 settler at 1 settlement. And that is the biggest benefit right there. You do not need to do anything at your secondary settlement at that time. What you do is you go into build mode or workshop mode and you grab yourself a settler and you hit Q if you happen to have the perk. Do bear in mind that the provisioner system needs the what is that? A perk. I'll put it on the screen. You need a perk in order to link those settlements, and once you have that perk, you can designate a settler as a provisioner. What does the settler do? It simply walks between 2 settlements and links the workbench storage. But what does that mean? Linking the workbench storage. Most of you already know this, but again, for those who don't or don't realize, this is what it does when a workbench is linked. As I said, and this is why we need to know what a workbench is and what this storage does, workbench storage gives access to your build menu, or your build menu extracts resources from this workbench, and so does your crafting system. These 2 abilities are then transferred to any other settlement in the network, meaning that if I access a crafting bench or the workbench itself at the Red Rocket, I can use the resources that are stored in the workbench at Sanctuary. What I cannot do, however, is personally extract items out of one workbench while I'm at another workbench. So if I'm at the Red Rocket, I cannot grab guns or ammunition out of the workbench at Sanctuary. That is simply not possible. I need to physically go there and extract those items for myself. So the only thing that is linked through the workbench are essentially ingredients and crafting components. That is what is transferred across the network and makes building and crafting easier. But if you wish to switch weapons, for instance, you still need to physically go to the workbench that stores the item, and that is a bit of a drawback. And that's pretty much what it does. The provisioner system does not link virtual storage, be warned. So if you're using Sim Settlements 2 and you use a provisioner system, this can be very handy to include a new settlement that has no resources available to itself into the fold, into your new network. But once it has been connected and a connection has been established and the new settlement is more or less proficient, it will be very wise to remove this provisioner and switch to one of the other two linking systems, as they provide better benefits for a bigger network of settlements. Alright, that's it for the provisioner system. Next, the caravan system. The caravan system is an inherent system with Sim Settlements 2. It does have benefits, but it also has quite a few drawbacks in my opinion. So how does the caravan system work? Well, for starters, you need a municipal plot at both settlements that you are linking. So that is already a huge disbenefit from the provisioner system, because you need to build something at both settlements, which requires resources. And since those settlements aren't linked yet, you need to move those resources manually to the new settlements in order to, first of all, build the plot. Secondly, you need a settler to build the plot, and then you need materials to build the plot up and make it functional. So it's already a crick in the neck in setting up compared to the provisioner system. But there are some benefits that make it worth it. Now, the upkeep cost of the caravan system is exceedingly high, unfortunately. What the provisioner system would only require essentially one settler per settlement to link it to the network, the caravan system actually requires 2 settlers per settlement to link up to the network. So your cost actually goes up more than 50%, because if you have, imagine if you will, Sanctuary and the Red Rocket, it takes 1 provisioner to link the 2, but it takes 4 caravanners to actually link those 2. Now, as your network becomes bigger, that payoff, that upkeep cost, becomes smaller per settlement, but it's still a huge price. Also note that the municipal plot, once you have selected the caravan system for the municipal plot, comes with an upkeep cost as well. I believe water and food is required, and the idea behind that is undoubtedly to feed and water the Brahmin that actually walks between the settlements. On the benefit side, however, this plot does produce 2 biological components, which goes into your virtual storage. So it does help a little bit with your upkeep of other plots, for instance. So it's extremely expensive, but does come with the benefit of the extra production, and at level 2 and 3 allows for fast travel. The other 2 systems do not permit this. So if you're playing survival mode and you want a very immersive, very lore-friendly fast travel system in survival mode, this overrides the fact that you cannot fast travel normally in survival mode, and now you can using the caravan system. Personally, I don't think it's worth it though, but that's completely up to you. So what does it link? The caravan system links the workbenches in the exact same way as the provisioner system does. No difference there. However, the caravan system also links the virtual, the virtual storage. So now your plots at Abernathy Farm, for instance, can pay their upkeep cost with stuff stored in the virtual storage of Sanctuary. So essentially, it does the same thing for workbenches as it does for these for this new virtual storage. Something the provisioner system does not do. But that's pretty much the only real benefit of the caravan system. And as I said, it is very expensive, and I don't think it's worth it. So, which one is the best choice then? Well, for us to understand that, I'm going to have to go through IDEX Logistics Station, or ILS for short. Now, I don't even know, that is the mod creator's name, I don't even know, is still currently working on integrating his IDEX Logistics System into the Sim Settlements 2 system. So some features don't seem to be working exactly as intended, but for me, as I've mentioned in previous videos, this is still, I'm completely lyric about all the options and abilities that ILS introduces. Now, with Sim Settlements 2, the new ILS system can be used separately from Sim Settlements 2, so you don't necessarily need Sim Settlements 2, but it does integrate into Sim Settlements 2. If you're using Sim Settlement 1 still, you can use ILS older version, but they are dependent on each other. So how does it work? Well, you can use the old ILS system with Sim Settlements 1, or you can use the new ILS system with either Sim Settlement 1 or 2, or independently. I hope I made that very clear. So how does ILS work? I'm going to mostly explain how it works with the Sim Settlement 2 system. Right. So when you use ILS independently, you will need to construct two things in order for it to work. One is the ILS desk, which you will find under the special tab in your workbench, and the other one is the virtual storage under also your special tab in the workbench. Once you build those two together and you assign a settler to the workbench, the desk, it will start working pretty much the same way as it would work when you integrate it with a municipal plot. So how does it work with a municipal plot? Well, there are two ways of building an ILS station. First, build a municipal plot, and once that's there, you can either place the desk, the ILS desk, on top of it, and you should get an interaction menu asking you if you want to converge the two together. Do mind that ILS only works with a 2x2 plot or an internal plot. It does not work with 3x3 or 1x1. That might be integrated, added to it later, but right now only those are your two options. And why would you want to build a bigger or a smaller one anyways? Well, the smaller one could be useful, I suppose. The caravan system that we mentioned before does work with a 1x1 plot, mind you, but personally, again, that's not a benefit that makes it worth it in my opinion. So, once you have your ILS set up, the alternative way, by the way, to set up an ILS is just like any other municipal plot. Just build a municipal plot, go to the building plan menu, and select ILS. Much easier in my opinion. So, what is the upkeep cost? Well, the upkeep cost is actually identical to that of a caravan. You pay water and food, and you get 2 fertilizers out of it. However, the building plan only requires 1 settler, just like the provisioner system. So it is much cheaper on your settlers to use ILS to start off with. So that's the biggest reason why I would never use the caravan system. So what does it link? Well, same as the caravan system and the provisioner system, it links the workbenches. Same as the caravan system, it also links your virtual storage. It does exactly the same thing, but as I said, at a lower cost of settlers. So it already has almost no drawback over the other two systems. The only drawback it does have, just like the caravan system, is that you need to build it and set it up in a new settlement. You need a provisioner there, you need a settler there, and you need the materials to build it all up. Another drawback of ILS is it does not have the fast travel system that the caravan system has, but that is the only drawback that I can think of over the caravan system. So why use ILS over the vanilla caravan system of Sim Settlements 2? Well, the only drawback, as I said, is the fast travel system is not there. But what are the benefits that it offers? Well, for one thing, it does auto collection, not to be confused with auto donation. Auto donation is the system where food and water is transferred across the network to settlements that have a surplus, or I should say from settlements that have a surplus to settlements that have a deficit. This system, however, is currently apparently a little bugged, the auto-donation system, because ILS does not seem to actually control this auto-donation system. The municipal plot underneath ILS seems to be doing that all by itself, and ILS is currently not overriding that system. So that is a small hiccup, and I certainly hope, I don't even know, will resolve this issue. So ILS is currently working together with the caravan system when it comes to donations between settlements that have a surplus and settlements that have a deficit. However, the caravan system works just fine, and you'll see in the information panel of ILS that it is not transferring any surpluses because another system is in place overriding that system. I certainly hope that gets resolved in the future. So, on contrary to the auto-donation system, ILS has an auto-collection system, and that is working brilliantly. So what is the auto-collection system? The auto-collection system simply collects all the items from all your workbenches in the network and deposits them into one specific container. It can be an insulated container, but I recommend you don't use that. It can also be a workbench container, and I highly recommend you place it in a workbench container. So how do you do that? Well, once you have installed ILS and you have 2 stations up and running, there is a virtual locker on your municipal plot. If you don't use the municipal plot and you use the naked version of ILS, you have to build that virtual locker yourself from the special tab in your workbench menu. Once that locker is in place, you access it and you immediately get a interaction menu which explains how it works. You get a designator into your menu, into your inventory, and wherever you place this designator, and again I highly recommend you place it at a workbench, becomes your central locker. This is your central storage facility, and everything sooner or later gets moved from all the workbenches into that particular workbench. The benefit being is that all your items are centralized. The disbenefit being, and again that's why I explained the concept of the containers earlier in this video, is that this workbench of course gets completely overloaded with items and stuff, meaning that the settlement that holds this centralized locker, this central facility, will frequently be attacked by enemies. Luckily, ILS has compensated for that. Whenever you designate a workbench as your central storage unit, you have the luxury of turning off attacks against this settlement. So if you want to do that, you can go ahead and do that. Once you remove the designator out of that workbench, the attacks will resume again. So that feature is automatic. And the benefit of this is, once you have designated a central location, a central storage facility, a central workbench, you can access this workbench from any other settlement that has an ILS station, because that virtual locker, once you open it, you will actually physically reach into the workbench of another settlement. And none of the other settlement logistic systems does this, only ILS. And that is the primary reason why I use ILS, because you will be able, once you play on survival mode, you will be able to reach into other settlements without having to physically move there. Mind you that the fast travel system of the caravan system kind of does the same. You can fast travel to any settlement and reach into their workbenches and pick up whatever you want, but you have to constantly remember what is in the damn workbench. And the auto collection system, again not to be confused with the auto donation system, will automatically move all your workbench contents to this one singular workbench. Mind you that the script for this does take a while. If I look at Sanctuary, there are always items there, and it takes quite a while for those items to actually disappear and show up at the Red Rocket, which is currently my centralized location unit. So that is one of the great benefits of the virtual locker that ILS provides. I also like the auto donation, again not to be confused this time with the collection system, the auto donation system that ILS has set up, but as I said, it is currently overwritten by another kind of donation system. Now the donation system of ILS, once it works properly, actually has an efficiency coefficient. No, how do you say that? An efficiency multiplier. I'll just call it an efficiency multiplier installed, meaning that depending on the level of your plot, a certain percentage of donated goods is lost. So at level 1, it's only 75% active. So you have a surplus of 10 water in a settlement. That settlement will only donate 7.5 water to the network. At level 2, it's 85%, and at level 3, it's 100%, so there's no more loss of materials. However, as I said, this is currently not overwritten by another donation system, which is always stuck at 100% and distributes it across the settlement. I'm pretty sure that this is the caravan system from Sim Settlements 2, and I sincerely hope that this can be turned off, or that ILS can override this system with the more lore-friendly version of ILS. Not to mention that when ILS overrides and takes control of this system, the info panel that ILS has in its terminal will also work better, because the currently information system, or the info that is on that display, is not entirely accurate, because it does not see the donations done by the caravan system that is still overriding ILS. Alright, another benefit of ILS, for instance, is that you can summon caravanners. So anyone assigned to the plot, the ILS plot, can be instantly summoned from wherever he is to that plot, and you can interact with that particular person. You give them armor and weapons and whatever the heck you want to do with them. Another small benefit of ILS is that it will automatically manage your linking system, and there are different algorithms for that. A third small benefit is that your caravanners are now renamed to the two settlements that they're walking between. So if you ever encounter someone in the wastelands called Provisioner or Caravaner from Sanctuary to Red Rocket, for instance, you immediately know who you're dealing with, who it is, and why they're there. And I believe that is all the benefits currently that ILS has. Yes, I sincerely hope it clears up the auto donation system soon, because I really want to use the ILS one instead of the Caravanners one. And that is pretty much the third and final system to link your settlements. So it's up to you to decide what you prefer. Right, so that's it for both the 4 container types and the 3 logistic systems. As I mentioned, all 3 of them have their benefits. Some are best used to initially set up settlements, others are better used in the long run. It's up to you which benefits you prefer over the disbenefits of the others. As I mentioned, the caravan system is extremely expensive, and that's why I personally would avoid it. But it does have that fast travel option there. Obviously, I prefer ILS, but it's completely up to you. Leave in the comments below if I've missed anything. Leave in the comments below which systems you prefer. And if you have any questions, of course, also leave that in the comment below. Please keep your comments constructive. And, well, that's it. I hope you will continue following my playthrough of Fallout 4 and Sim Settlements 2. I'm having a lot of fun with it, and I hope you'll have fun watching it. And you'll see me in the next one.